Don't know how that happened. All right, so we're kind of semi-starting again. For some reason, when I chose to go live, Facebook said no. But now Facebook has said yes. Yes to the dress. And we are live on all the platforms. Okay, cool. So anyways, we'll just go back to it. Yeah, so you didn't get to watch Loki. So we won't even though this isn't that kind of show where we talk about Loki. I do have to say that, and last night's wasn't written by Waldron himself, but he's like the showrunner or the head writer or whatever he is on that show. Man, that show is solid. It is really good. And I love Rick and Morty. You know, I'm not like a crazy Rick and Morty fan where I'm like, you know, wearing the t-shirts and stuff, but I watch it. I love it enough that I pre-watch Rick and Morty so that way when my kids want to watch it, I know where to fast forward.
Right.
or like you know what I mean?
The speed bumps, you know.
Yeah, I do a little bit of that.
Right.
Like I'm not super about censorship, but you know, there's certain things like in the last episode about what they were eating that I just don't want to ever have them have to explain to them. And
it's understandable.
Yeah. So anyways though, but the idea of this dude going from Rick and Morty and then writing Loki and then doing a Star Wars movie, that is like the most exciting thing for me. I'm more excited about Waldron doing Star Wars than I am Kevin Feige. That might be blasphemy, but I mean that's what's like. I want to see what this guy writes.
Well, I had just read an interview with him a few days prior, and I didn't know he was writing the Feige movie. I had no idea until yesterday when I was like, really? Are you really? Like yesterday, there's a show before, but when you talked about it, I was like, that's the one I commented. It was on the weekend, but I was like, he's doing that? Like, wow. You know, like that. I'm super excited. I mean, I'd be a little more cautious if it was within the current Lucasfilm, because you never know. Maybe it won't make it to bat, right? Like it's 50-50 at this point. But Feige and them seem to get, like, I mean, he's wrote Doctor Strange too, right? So I mean, he's getting them across the goalpost, right? Like to the finish line. So yeah, I hope that that's the way it goes from here all the way through, man. It's like, it's super exciting.
Yeah. Dan Harmon was saying that like for that season, for the 2 seasons he wrote of Rick and Morty, when they were like going to hire, they did like a blind read where like they took the scripts of writers with no name on it and read the best cold open, and he had both of the best cold opens.
I believe it.
So yeah, and then looking at the quality of the writing on Loki overall, and I know he didn't write every episode, but as he's clearly he's the one who's leading that or whatever, it seems really strong, and that sensibility I think is gonna, the ability to write a dumb character like Morty
right.
and then in a complex sci-fi, sometimes the Rick and Morty like plots are heavy sci-fi and very clever at the same time while being ridiculous and irreverent, and then being able to write the things that he's done on Loki. I won't spoil the episode for you from last night, obviously, but it's like when you put all that together, you're like, yeah, this guy, he's gonna rock Star Wars. He really is. I think I have more faith in him and what he's going to do on his Star Wars project than any of the writers we've had before.
And then Kevin Feige hires Uwe Boll to direct, and you know, like it's all there, right? The dream team is assembled.
Be crazy.
We gotta weigh the balance. We gotta scale, right? Like,
oh yeah, really quickly before I forget, the best way to support the channel is, or two of the ways to support the channel is you can become a channel member on YouTube itself. And if you need audio versions of the show because you can't watch the show at work or whatever, you can support on Patreon. And I'm uploading after every episode. I'm grabbing the audio from the show and smacking it up over there. So I'm doing my best on these episodes since I started the practice. There's a couple up there that I just put up because I was like, let's just throw them up anyway. But I'm trying now to read the chat and be like, I am waving my hands like a C-3PO robot, so the people know on audio. But Yeah, so if that helps some people, because I got a lot of messages about that, about probably like 10 or 11. So I'm like, I figure if I'm hearing that much, then there's people who need the audio.
One quick,
So
yeah, I just want to say your deadpan delivery is awesome. Like yesterday, you were like, bot in the chats asked me if I want to be famous. No, you know,
no.
you roll right on through the list of
Oh.
topics. I was like, that's okay.
Yeah, dude. So like, obviously, like it's kind of it's a kind of a lame question to ask in 2021 when we're all adults now. But how did you get into Star Wars and stuff? Like, did you do you have a story? Do you have a story there?
Well, I mean, sure. I mean, I'm an '80s kid, so obviously. But my first memory of Star Wars was we had this place called Dow Stereo. I grew up in San Diego,
Mm-hmm.
so we had this place called Dow Stereo, which was like your Best Buy of the '80s. It's where you went to get a TV or a stereo, sometimes a washer. I think they had them way in the back. And I remember walking into the Dow. My parents they just got credit cards. They were like, "Let's get into debt." And we went to this Dow Stereo, and they had one of those like early projection TVs,
Mm-hmm.
where like it folded over, wood panel, and we didn't get that.
I had a
But
rich uncle who gave us that, and the actual TV isn't coming to America. When Akeem goes to McDowell's house to like serve drinks,
yeah,
the actual TV is there that a rich uncle gave us.
it's got the RGB lights, you know what I
Yep.
mean? Like, yeah, it's so awesome. And I remember looking at it, like that's cool. And then I looked up, and it was the opening, the Tantive Fort when they're first going in, the stormtroopers, and Darth
Yeah.
Vader walks through, and I was like, "What?" And my mom, for some reason, who it was my mom's a strange character, but she was like, "I don't want you watching that." And this girl that worked there, I remember she looked, it's Star Wars. And I was like,
Yeah.
I looked down, my Star Wars? Like, what is Star Wars? You know what I mean? Apparently, my uncle told me he took me to Empire, but I was like 1.5, like when it came out. So I mean, I remember Jedi after that. This was in between Empire and Jedi. So it was like 82. Yeah, 81, 82-ish. And I was just like, what is this? And that's it. That's the day I was hooked.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, dude. I as a kid, I don't know if I've talked about it on this show, so I think it's fair to retread, I guess. But I was coming down the apartment stairs, and there were a bunch of I was probably 3, and there were a bunch of kids that were probably 5, and they're all playing with Star Wars toys at the bottom of the stairs, and I saw the AT-AT driver, and I was like, that spaceman is cool. I want
Yeah,
that. I'm like, Mom, I want that.
I remember my father did a security company,
Mm-hmm.
and there's this like a country club that he did security for. So we got to go to the country club, and they had a pool for like a year. And I remember I went to this pool, and I was like, wow, this is like wealthy. So I jump in the pool, and I'm swimming around, and there is this toy, and I picked it up, and it was the Hoth action figure, right? The Hoth, and I was like, oh my god, like I was like, I found this, and no one cared. I was like, and I kept it. So it was, my mom was like, just you can take it, and
So
that was like the figure.
So did your mom relent on Star Wars pretty soon after that for you, or was it like was it contraband in the
It was
Sketchcraft household?
contraband until like Desert Storm, and then she went super conservative. So like
Uh-huh.
my mom I grew up on Helen Reddy songs, and she was into the whole movement, the feminist movement of the '70s and '80s, and then around Desert Storm, she just turned into like Fox News before that happened. Like, and so it was
Yeah.
weird. Like I told you, it was like weird. It was weird contrasting because as a kid, it was like she didn't know guns, so I could have like the figures but no guns, and I could have Care Bears, which is fine. But the other kids at school didn't understand that. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like they were not sympathetic in the '80s to that. So it was like I was like, but they're colorful. Like they're like Ewoks, but they stare, right? Like
Yeah, I wanted a Care Bear as a kid, and my dad was like, no. He was like pissed off about it.
yeah.
Yeah, I had a weird childhood growing up. My mom had me when she was 17. So I basically
Same.
had a big 80s party girl big sister for a mom. Not recommended, anyone. Not a good idea. Not a good idea. This
Big
is
hair.
what they grow up to become. But anyways, I go over to this neighbor kid's house, right? and he is really Top Gun just came out, and we always played Star Wars, and like I didn't have that many Star Wars friends. This is like after Return of the Jedi. It's like by 86, nobody's really talking about Star Wars, but
The dark times.
This kid was down to play Star Wars, so we were buds. And we go to the movie theater and we see Top Gun, and we're like, this movie is rad. This is good stuff. And he's like, I want to buy the soundtrack. So he gets Highway to the Danger Zone as I think it was a maxi single cassette. And we get back home, we get our jets out that we have our toys, we're like playing with it. He has the cassette on, and his mom walks into the room and sees or hears Highway to the Danger Zone. She's like, what is that? What does that mean? What does that mean? And we're like, you're not going to win Top Gun. You know,
I can't land the jet on the aircraft carrier.
Yeah. Goose is dead, and we're sad. And so she takes the cassette out and starts just unraveling this dude's cassette tape that he just bought with his own money, and tears it up. And I'm just like, this lady is really weird. And so then like a couple months goes by, and I'm over at his house, and we're watching my taped off of was it Showtime? It was Select TV copy of Empire Strikes Back, I think it was Select TV. And we stopped watching it. We just got like tired of watching it for some reason. We decided to go back to my house. I open up the door, and my mom is there with his mom, and they're smoking pot. And his mom is just stoned off her face,
like the Poltergeist parents, right? Like,
yeah. And it was like, to me at that point, I was just like, 80s parents are idiots.
And until you said dude, I was gonna jump in and go, and that friend was Patty Jenkins. You know? It was like, Jason, damn it, you know?
Yeah. No. It was just like, and then I remember, and this will relate to something else Star Wars related, because I'm not focused today. There was and then later on that very night on the news, I had a lot of Rambo toys, and they were showing mass burnings of Rambo toys. and there were like parents digging a hole on the news and putting Rambo toys in there and lighting them on fire and then putting dirt on it and saying, like, it was really weird. And I just remember being like, I don't trust this generation.
They all flipped too, like 10 years later. It was really weird.
It was just back and forth. It made no sense.
Yeah.
But I saw an article, and I don't remember where it was, but at first it didn't hit me hard. But as it's gone on, it was Quentin Tarantino saying he wishes that he made Rambo remade First Blood with Adam Driver. How awesome would that be?
I've listened to every Tarantino interview. How did I miss that one? Like,
I just saw it. I saw it like last night somewhere, and it didn't occur to me, and I was just like, that would be so good, because he's like the intelligent version of Sylvester Stallone at that time.
Probably more like the book. When I worked at Playco was a toy store in the San Diego, and they had one. We had
it here. We had one in Lakewood.
I worked at Playco in 96, 97. That Christmas, Tickle Me Elmo, Shadows of the Empire Christmas. And I worked with this guy named John, who was like long hair, kind of hippie dude. And he goes, he was in Vietnam, and he was against the military, but he's like, the First Blood, those Rambo movies suck, but you should read the book. And I was like, I don't want to do homework. Like,
can you read it to me?
Yeah. So, but I did. I read it. It's totally different. So Tarantino's Rambo would be amazing. If that's his last film, I mean, that would be. It probably won't be, but that would be amazing.
The vibe I got was, I wish I didn't have this stupid stipulation that I put on myself to make one last film, and I was making that one too.
Well, I'm reading his book, man, the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood book right now, and it's awesome. Like, if he just keeps writing books, then I'll keep reading them, And he breaks all the rules too. Like, they tell you when you write novels, don't use any of those words that end in ly. You
Mhm.
know, like the adjective adverbs or whatever, like and he's like, I don't care, like it's L-Y. He
Yeah.
doesn't, because he's Quentin Tarantino, like, so
Yeah, like Irvine Welsh, who did Train Spotting. I mean, when you read his Train Spotting, the actual novel of it, it's written in slang. Like, and it's like that. They don't. He doesn't write does not. He write does not, because it's like the accent's all there, and it
right.
takes a long time to get going on that one. But then once it's going, you're like really immersed in it, and so yeah, I think it's cool to break the rules when you know them.
Yeah, absolutely,
That's kind of how it is. Like when you know the rules, it's okay to break them, and I'm going to assume that Quentin Tarantino knows all the rules.
I won't drag this out because people
No,
didn't sign up for that show. But
yeah,
could you imagine a fake novelization? Tarantino writes Rambo with Adam Driver on the cover, though, like, and it's a fake novel. Like, he just does a photo shoot, so it's like the novelization of this Rambo movie that never existed.
yeah, I'd be into it.
Yeah, that'd be
I,
amazing.
yeah, it would be really really good. So okay, oh wait, did he answer? He answered. He said, "A little bird asked me to inquire." Huh. Okay, I just to be honest with you, I don't know, but I will look into this and see what I can fish out because that is interesting. Bad timing Euro semifinal. I'll lip read. Oh no. What is Euro semifinal? What is that? Is that like Olympic stuff or something?
Football.
Football. Okay,
Yeah.
shows what I know. They don't have Darth Vaders and Chewbacca's. I'm confused.
I spent 3 years in Germany in the army during when episode 1 came out, so like
Uh
99 to 2001, and I was like, oh, football. They're crazy with the football. Like,
huh.
they riot with the football. I was like, this is dangerous. Like, I'm from San Diego, where it's like Padre games are kind of like a goof.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we were in My Blue Heaven. Like that. That's anytime I feel like I don't live there now, but anytime I feel like going back home to San Diego, I just put in My Blue Heaven. I'm like, yeah, it's close enough.
Close enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I a semi Steve Martin connection was they were filming a movie called Bowfinger's Big Thing down the street from me for months, which became Bowfinger, and it's directed by Frank Oz.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting out there, but I didn't know that then. And this is like the internet's not really like that common yet, so IMDb is kind of like not really that good yet. I don't even know, but what it was then. And so, anyways, I'm sitting there watching Frank Oz direct for like weeks. And then later on, when I figure out it's that Frank Oz, I was pretty mad at myself. I was like, man, like he was high. He was very nice to everybody in Long Beach and the area and stuff. I could have talked to Yoda, like as knowing he was Yoda. Instead, he was just like, hey, and I was like, hey, it's a director.
Well, speaking of Frank Oz, so you were talking about that the Yoda, the Minch world yesterday,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
I'm on a Henson kick because I've been reading that. I've been listening to the audio novel, the audio biography from Henson, the guy that did the Lucas one.
Mhm.
So I finished the Lucas one, and then I got to the Henson, and the Henson Oz connection is, I didn't know, like, Henson knew Oz's parents when Henson was still in high school. And
Mm.
like he actually offered, he was friends with his family, and they're a whole family of puppeteers. Like, that's where he
Mm.
comes from. And so he offered to hire Frank when he was still in high school. And they were like, no, but then right when he graduated, he went over there to work with them. And
Yeah.
so, like, when Jim died, like, he was like, Frank like broke up on stage. They had the whole
I saw
ceremony.
that. It's
Yeah.
super hard to watch.
Because it was literally like a dad figure to him. Like, it was a second father. Like, that's not even a joke. So
Yeah.
but I didn't know Frank was the LaChoy dragon, dude. So,
Mhm.
like, my favorite Henson puppet, they had that Skirble. I was in LA during the Skirble Center. The Kerbal, the museum. They have a museum. And they had the Henson exhibit back in 2019, 2018. I was out there for E3.
Yeah.
And so I went, and I was hoping they had the LaChoy Dragon, which is a series of commercials they did, where the giant dragon who would just go through a store and knock everything over with his tail. That's Frank Oz. And it was the last time he did, like, get in a suit, the get in the
Yeah.
suit thing, like so that's why he turned down doing Big Bird. Like, he turned that down. He's like, I'm never doing the suit.
Never getting in the suit again. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to see the Minch world so bad. I mean, that is right. What you described is how George would have done it with Henson in the 80s if they had.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
I want that so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was going to ask you something. I just lost it.
Well, it was very similar to the way they did it in the Dark Crystal series on Netflix.
Yeah.
You know, with the Hup, you know, those little Hup creatures, and they're all like drinking, and they're like they got it's like this little Muppet Hobbitville thing, and I was like, if you just put the little Grogu puppets in there, and they're like puppets, like, and they're riding bikes, and then
Yeah.
I started thinking of the Muppet movie when they're all riding, you could see their feet, you know,
Yeah.
like
I don't know what you call it, that old timey bike with like the giant big wheel. I want.
Grogu's got to have the big wheel now, right? Grogu.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Maybe his brother has the Rambo one. That's the striped version of the Minch, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No. I mean, it's like with Star Wars, you want them to like lean into eccentric, and you don't want them to like turn any of that off, or like make it where that can't happen. And so that's why, like, when they say, you know, like, for instance, I don't want this, but if there was a story, a book, a novel, a comic, a episode of a cartoon about a Yoda who was just a straight up loser, and it was just like from Maz Eisley kind of place with no force powers, and it's like a little drunk or something like that. Like, would be hilarious, because it would be the exact opposite of what we know and what we expect. So it's like, you want to circumvent expectations. And like, when they go like, all of them are force, you know, prodigies, you go like, it goes like, man, but it just closes down so many possibilities. At the same time, unless there's just like, unless they make them like an extinct species or a near extinct species or something like that.
I think the thing to remember, you're really good at bringing, like, for me, like, I don't memorize all the storylines and the characters. I really like come from production. Like, I grew up, like, I just always wanted to make things. So I memorized who worked on what was the thought process that went behind it. And one of the first things I ever read when I was a kid, I think it was Leonard Maltin or someone, was like, Star Wars is like the ultimate like American like thing, in that it's this minestrone, it's a soup, it's all these different things of culture and pop culture and foreign cinema and American cinema. It's all these things and what we do is we make collages and we jumble them together, you know. And so sometimes you're leaning more heavily on this flavor or that flavor, but it's this jumble of stuff, and that's why it's so hard to be like, well, Star Wars is a Western. At times it's a Western, at times it's a Kurosawa, at times it's a Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, at times it's a weird, someone was smoking the devil's grass when, like, I mean, what is Jabba's palace? I mean, that is a strange it goes from this goofy thing to people being eaten alive in like 3 minutes, man. Like, you know, and then back to like goofy jokes, and that's not a negative. That's just it's a mixture of stuff.
Yeah, I've always found like how Lucas used environment to be like really like fascinating, and especially like when there's like the Venn diagram with an overlap. Like, for instance, on Tatooine, you have like the Lars homestead, and that is going to very much be a Western / Little House on the Prairie kind of
Even got the kid from
environment.
Little House on the Prairie.
And it's exactly,
Right.
yeah. You got that actor who was in some of those there, and
Yeah.
and it's like, so and then like when you watch Attack of the Clones, like Anakin's going to save his mom, they like stills that shot near the moon from the Searchers, the John Wayne movie,
Mhm.
and like you have that. But then when you get into the Jabba the Hutt realm, he's this gluttonous like creature, this slob monster, and then that's when burping and farting and just like cheap laughs are completely on the table. And it's but there's like these rules, and I don't know if it's intuitive or if like he thought of it in these terms, but it definitely goes that way. And there's like times when like when you see what happens on Coruscant, you don't see any of that on Coruscant. But then when you get to like Naboo, which is just all romance, it's a lot like that Last Crusade Venice where they sigh every time he says Venice, and it has like that. But then you also have the space cows and them falling on it, which starts to get a little into that silly realm. But it's also supposed to be George Lucas's bizarro idea of romanticism.
Well, I put Lucas and Henson in the same category, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they stressed in the Henson book was that it was largely improv. Like he didn't even script any lines until he did the Jimmy Dean show, and they wrote lines for him when he was on there with Ralph the dog, which apparently was his big breakout character. I always thought it was Kermit. Turns out it was Ralph the dog. I didn't know. And then I started thinking, I think George's Star Wars is like the world's most expensive improv. Like there's all these things that get set up, and yeah, there's a script, but it felt like, he's just like it on that day of the set, or there was a decision, or we'll just do this, and then someone does their thing, and then that ends up in there, and Harrison just throws a line out that becomes super iconic. No one intended that, and so that's why it's like when you try to script that perfectly, you're like, what is it? I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's quite there. It almost gets there, and I'm like, there's almost like there's a little bit of that. It needs to kind of just happen on the spur of the moment thing, and that's very difficult to do, especially when they're trying to make $1 billion off every movie now. So
yeah,
and I think maybe that's where the TV shows, because of the smaller scale of not just budget but of marketing, right? Like it doesn't cost as much to market those things as they would have to a film, that
right.
they can allow for more of that, right? Like maybe with the stagecraft too, like it's less, you have to be on this mark and have to do this because the visual effects is already being worked on, kind of thing, that there can be more room for that improv style stuff. I just wanted, before I forget, I've always wanted to say this on camera, is the more I think of the Phantom Menace and George, and Jar Jar, and how goofy the Gungans were supposed to be, I think to the beginning, the documentary, when they did a test of Jar Jar as a felt puppet, they have a sequence where he's like just off camera. And I keep, like, if I had the Thanos glove, I'd be the worst guy, because I would just be like, I want all the Gungans to be puppets. Bam. Because I think, like, if you suck those little puppets into pod racer engines, right, and they fly out of it, you're gonna laugh. Like, it's stupid,
Right.
but you're gonna be like, that's so funny, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and it would be ridiculous, like, when Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor are looking over at, like, the felt puppet, right? Like,
Yeah.
so
yeah. With on that one, I always wondered, like, I always wanted to know more backstory to that moment. Like, I took it later on when I saw it, like as more of an adult, I took it as they were doing like almost like a test for like how would his ears flap in the wind kind of thing or something like that. But at the same time, I was like, were they considering a puppet at one time for it? Like what was the, where would that have gone, or how would they have tried to make that work?
I just want to see that puppet. It has to be in a vault, right? Like that Jar Jar.
The felt one. Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure. And at the same time, when you look at what they did with Yoda, the puppeteering in the prequels, whatever reason, did not come together as well as it should have. And like they hired people from what was that movie, Nightbreed?
Oh, wait. What are you talking about? No, I'm thinking of the one with the Russian vampires. Is that what you're talking about? Like,
no.
Night Watch. That's Night Watch.
Night Watch. I saw Night Watch, by the way. I saw one. I don't know if this version ever came out, but I saw it at this indie theater in Irvine, and the subtitles were written in red blood and they were animated.
That's awesome.
It was cool.
It is awesome.
And when it came out, like on streaming and like on DVD back then, it didn't have any of that. I was like, why not? It was really cool. But
I didn't want to pay the guy.
No, a movie called Nightbreed. It was like a horror film. It has like, lots of good creatures in it and stuff, and kind of has a sort of a Hellraiser vibe in terms of the look, but it's rated R, but it's more cartoony. But all of from what I could recall, a lot of people from that were hired onto Phantom Menace a few years later, and so yeah, I'm always like a little bit like they reused, that one creature in the market, the Woobies vendor. That's from the television show Monsters. Do you remember that? It was like like Twilight Zone-esque anthology horror show. That was like a rarely used or barely used or an unused creature from that. And it's just like, it's so strange in a way, like how low rent and low budget a lot of the puppets and the creatures in the prequels are.
It was the one thing that I was actually, one second.
Sure.
It was the one thing that bothered me at the time when it came out. I was like, why? I mean, I thought, I didn't know at the time, like, did Henson and them do this? Like, who did this? Because it didn't feel the puppetry felt so off, especially Yoda. I mean, like it didn't even remotely. People at the time were like, "Well, he looks younger than he would have." I'm like, "Yeah, but he's not. He isn't even moving properly. Like this is."
Yeah.
It felt like it was the Knott's Berry Farm version of Star Tours, right? Like,
yeah, for sure. I was at Celebration, the first one, and Rick McCallum was there, and he was giving his talk, and he wasn't addressing the puppet being bad, but what he was saying was he's like, our thinking on Yoda and this puppet is that when you see him in The Empire Strikes Back, he's been a refugee, and he's been living in the swamp as a refugee for 20 years. And so he's very like he's lost a lot of color and he's more gaunt. And then he was like, and I promise you, if a creature was introduced as a puppet in Star Wars, he will remain a puppet in Star Wars. And then 2 years later, Attack of the Clones is like doing Yoda as CGI Yoda because that didn't work. And I always wondered, and this is like conspiratorial and probably just nonsense, but like, were the puppets set up to be bad? Like was there almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy of
to make the Gungans look better, right?
yeah, like you know what I mean? Like was it designed that way to like push, like we could just do this all digitally. And I'm a big, I mean, I go both ways. Like I definitely love when you have a great puppet, like what they did in Force Awakens. What Baba Joe like was the first guy that we saw, and like I saw him walk out in San Diego at Comic-Con. It's amazing.
The bird with the chickens and
yeah,
all that. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, love it. It's so awesome. And so like I never want to see that kind of artistry go away and be divorced from Star Wars because visual effects or CGI can do it. At the same time, I'm like CGI is so amazing now that people don't even know when they're seeing it. And that's and like so I'm like, I'm like, yeah, well,
the proof of that was that fire in the Gulf of Mexico last week. When people were like, that's a visual effects shot. I'm like, that's real. But it had all the makings of a visual effects shot where like water's on the camera. It's got a little shaky cam. It's got orange and blue. So that must mean,
like, it's After Effects. I know After Effects, and that's After Effects, friend.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no. Yeah. And that was always like, the thing that you see pushed around now is like all of the prequels, like all the models that they used. And it was like, yeah, for the most part, they were using models as sets. And that's what you don't like. You just don't understand that.
Well, I just bought the it's not here yet. It's on the way. Is the Photo Archives book from to the prequel 99 to 2005. Because the movies aren't quite my thing, but I'm fascinated with the development of the prequels. Like from George sitting there with pencil on yellow paper to writing episode 1. Like I want to put a full copy. I will pay $1,000 for a full copy of that thing. Just scan it and make them as like, so you could read it like just on like a pad of paper. And I want to know, like, was that like, what were they saving money on? Like, what was he trying to save money on? And like, was he using the mentality of that indie filmmaker, even though he had a budget of 150 million, like at the time, like, is he still trying to like, we got to make sure we save money? Like, don't save money on the Yoda puppet, George. Like that's not where you want to save the money. You don't have to like just put a backpack in there and like just give them a non-weathered, clean backpack. If Yoda was living in the desert, I'm like, that backpack's been there. Have you seen your kids' backpacks after a week? That is the cleanest backpack I've ever seen as Anakin's. It's stuff like that. Like, where did you save the money on? Like, I'm just curious.
Yeah. And I have a video up on this channel, on the YouTube channel, where it's a quote. I think was Phil Tippett? And he basically says that he's under the impression that Pepsi paid for gave Lucasfilm basically $1 billion to direct all 3.
When you said that, because here's the thing, I found your MakingStarWars.net through the Jedi Council back when The Force Awakens came out. That's when I started getting back into Star Wars news, and I was working on licensed Star Wars apparel at the time. And I had told them, it was funny, we had right before Disney bought Lucasfilm, we had a meeting with them, and they were like, we need the shirts to sell. And I was like, Avengers had just come out. I'm like, Avengers just came out, guys. Like, you haven't had a movie since 2005. So this is 2012.
Yeah.
And I'm like, even if you started production today, it'd take 3 years. Like, like you won't have a movie in 3 years. There's going to be at least another Avengers movie, and you are up against a wall here. I can't make Star Wars cool. I wish I could. Star Wars, you guys need to make it cool. We just sell the shirts, man. I was like, hire and I literally said the Star Trek guy or Brad Bird, because that's always like my go-to dude, right? I was like, or Brad Bird. And get one of those dudes and just make it. And when they announced it, I ran through the halls, like a bad sports fan, like, yeah, and I was so excited. And then, obviously the reality of development comes through. But I remember at the time, so I started getting news, and Jedi Council would constantly reference your site as a source of news.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I started going like, all right, this guy's dope. And then when you talked about how long you've been doing it, the original Celebration, and I started remembering all those prequel stories. And when you brought up that they paid him $1 billion so long as he directed all 3, I'm like, one, I remember something like this. Like, this isn't, I know sometimes you can have those false memories, right? But I'm like, no, I remember this, and that it makes, because he does not want to direct. He didn't want to direct Jedi, and it wasn't just because of the divorce, which was a big issue. He just did not like being on. That's why he didn't direct Empire. He didn't like going to sets. He just wanted to tell people what to do and whatever. And so I believe that that's true 100%.
Yeah, I think CGI in that instance, and I don't mean this like in a bad way either, but I think it's control. It's like when somebody is doing stuff with a puppet and they're making the puppet, and it's not like you can't really sit there and you don't know how it's going to turn out, like when it's in its various stages. But with CGI, it's a lot easier to know, like, yeah, this is going to look great with textures. We have texture packs. We know how that's going to come out.
The making of Attack of the Clones, when Rob Coleman stuck on that guy stuck on the Yoda shot, begun the Clone Wars has for like a week.
Yeah.
And George is like, and it's just like 2 millimeters different. Oh, tweak it,
Yeah.
like this poor guy. If that were a puppet, it just would have been done, but
you got what you got. And
right.
and that's where, I like, there was a time, I don't know, did Robert Zemeckis ever go back to making a live action film? Because he made
he did
that Beowulf movie.
He just did the flight movie, right?
Or did he? Okay.
With Denzel Washington.
Yeah, because he was like, at one time he's like, I'm never going back to live action. And
right.
You could just see like how you can see what a turn on it was for those guys to just be able to like control everything and
it's air conditioned.
And it's air conditioned. And,
right.
And they're not 29 anymore. They don't want to go out to Tunisia and stuff. Yeah. So I get it. At the same time, I'm so glad, just to like be clear, that Lucas made those movies the way that he made them, that they're batshit as they are, and that it now they're, with all the Star Wars movies that they're making, just what we get is just it's so different, and I think that's both good and makes me value the prequels more.
The thing that I think I appreciate the most about the prequels now was when you brought up the George Lucas selects. The photos that he started with Attack of the Clones, where he would just put up a photo every week, and everyone would run to. It was just a way to promote that website when they run to. Apparently, someone was like, StarWars.com is not getting traffic. We got to get traffic, and so that's how they did it. But it was a genius thing because everyone was like, we weren't hounding for all the behind us. Matter of fact, when Ain't It Cool News would put up one of those Super Shadow things or something, I would be like, I don't even care. When's the next George Lucas Select coming up? Because I don't have to run around weird. I didn't have the term conspiracy theory at the time, but rumors and whatever, like I'll just, if they would do that now, if we were getting a Book of Boba Fett picture, you know what I mean? Or something in it. Some of them aren't winners. They're not winners. Sometimes it's not, they're not all Jango Fett with an umbrella. Sometimes it was like a zoom up on my mug. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or here's a neon light, and you're like, what is that? Is that a Sith temple? No, it's just this corner fixture. Car. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just had this random memory come into my head of reading Ain't It Cool News, and it was the dinner scene table the dinner table scene with Anakin and Qui-Gon and Jar Jar, and with the tongue,
Yeah.
and everyone was like, "It's fake," and I had heard it was fake before I even read it. So I'm like, I gotta look at this for myself. And then I read the line, "Pod racing on Malastare, very fast, very dangerous," and I was like, Malastare sounds like a George Lucas Star Wars planet, and it sounds good. This is totally real. Like that's when I knew, because people today the art of naming planets has been really really helped by Star Wars. But back then, every planet was like, this is Zebulon 5.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm not a. You said the other day you're not a fan of Filoni's names as much, and I would agree. But then I started. I'm always like my own devil's advocate because I sit in a cave by myself, and I'm like, nobody would have guessed Grogu. Nobody.
No,
Like
nobody would have guessed
never would have
that.
happened.
Nope.
Right? Yeah.
No, nobody would have guessed it. That's for damn sure. It's yeah. Like I said, it's like it doesn't matter. It doesn't keep me up at night. But I do wish that there was like all of the names feel like RPG, like one RPG session every time though. And like I can't remember them very well because of that.
Well, there's only so many backwater Southern California towns they could name after Star Wars characters. Like when you take the 8 into Arizona and you go through Yuma, was it not Yuma, where they shot Return of the Jedi, right out in Southern
Buttercup
California.
Valley.
You go through Fortuna.
Yeah.
So you go and you're like, Fortuna, and you're like, yeah, so somebody. And then I started thinking, like, did George get a boba drink like somewhere? And he was like, boba. I like it.
It makes me fit. This makes me fit. Boba Fish. Boba Fett, yes. Yeah. So dumb.
Like what's that Chipotle now? Like, would that be, would it be Chip Oatley, right? Would Chip Oatley be
right?
the guy who took out Starkiller Base?
My girlfriend Modestica. Yes. Yeah. So what did Steven say? One of the Rick and Morty writers did Star Trek Lower Decks. Okay.
But that's a very one-to-one. Like I always feel like I like it when someone, like as an artist, like you play music, so like people only associate you with the last thing you did.
Yeah.
So like the last game I worked on was Crash Bandicoot 4, and then now people, if I said, "Hey man, I'm working on Mortal Kombat," they're like, "The Crash guy." Like, guys, like it's not like I was training my whole life in my room only drawing Bandicoots to one day do the one job. Like that's a job you got hired to do, and then you have range. Talented people, can work on. I mean, look at Dick Donner from doing The Omen to Superman to Goonies to Maverick to Lethal Weapon. Like, so it's just I think that's
Twilight Zone. He started on some Twilight Zone.
Twilight Zone, man. The one that got me that I didn't realize was Last Christmas. My wife apparently told me she'd never seen Scrooged, and I'm like, it's like a proto Groundhog Day. Like, so I had to go and show it to her, and then I realized Richard Donner directed this. Like, I didn't realize it until Last Christmas.
Yeah, I love Scrooged, and it's one of those movies that now that it's like it's older now, it's harder to get, like, if I start like dating somebody, I'm like, they haven't seen it. I'm like, they're like, oh, I don't know, and then they see it and then they love it.
It's got Karen Allen.
It does, and she acts really good in it.
Fantastic job. You're just like, this is so good. Like, she could have been in Last Crusade at the time, 100%. Like,
I would actually, God, I feel like now I'm just being hard on all of the women in Indiana Jones.
Oh no!
But I watched Last Crusade because I bought the 4K transfers of it, and I was watching Last Crusade with my daughter who's never seen it, and I was like, man, Alison Doody is terrible. She really is. And like scenes that I thought I was like, I remember, like, the scene when he like takes like the flower and like puts it on her. He's like, "Do you permit me?" and all that stuff. As a kid, I was like, this guy's a pimp. And then like I saw it and I'm like, this scene is awful. It's hard to watch right now. And her delivery is really bad. But I guess after after Temple of Doom with Willie, you're kind of like, cool.
Look, man, at this point though, like I would totally accept a Kate Capshaw doing that again. You know, like I would just be like, look, I'll watch it. You know, it's nostalgia. Yeah, it's nostalgia. I don't care. I'll watch it. Like,
yeah,
you know, so many people are making things. This is like our Indiana Jones. I'm like, but then you could just put them all in there. Like someone was saying, I think what was it? Harloff. One of those guys were saying that that the actor who played Short Round is a stunt coordinator now, right? Like, and why, if he's a stunt coordinator working in Hollywood, like you could easily put him in an Indiana Jones, and you know, and like that would, I mean, in like the Lucasfilm game that LucasArts game they were making, where it took place in Chinatown.
Yeah.
Around 2012, 2013, the one they canceled.
Yeah.
Like that easily you could bring back. I mean, I'm not saying maybe he doesn't have the best acting chops now. Who knows if he's been acting.
Right.
But you could easily put him in as someone to help Indy like through a third of the film. You know, like it'd be a great, you know, like moment. But I mean, the Mangold probably won't. Like the way he works, he doesn't seem to care about nostalgia at all.
No. I mean, based on like my take on that was that movie didn't turn out. They weren't happy with it. They weren't super happy with it, so therefore they don't return to it. And then Spielberg exits the picture, and then we don't know how much of what Spielberg was making remained. And I think that's what took it off the table for sure.
I don't think what they understand though is like, for me, Temple of Doom played like, it was the one I saw the most of because of pay-per-view. Yeah. So like in the 80s we had pay-per-view where it would be a channel would just play previews of a film, and then you would go on the phone and order it, and it would start at a time at home. And I would just watch the previews of Indiana Jones for like months, man. Like, you know, like when Little Shop of Horrors would be on pay-per-view, you just be watching all they're going to do, you know, you watch that little bit and then you'd come back when it come back on. So I saw that the most. And so the minecart sequence was just, I lived for that minecart. The minecart sequence was just something I was like, I can't wait for the minecart sequence. I'm like, minecart sequence. And when...
No, I was going to say, I used to watch Last Crusade in Scrambled when it was on pay-per-view.
That's how we watched porn too back in the day.
And then eventually I graduated to that.
Yeah.
You can see it. You can see it.
Right. Yeah. And then when the Disney ride came out, and I got on it in like '96, we went for grad night, and I was like, this is cool. I was hoping it was the mine carts. Because I mean, we can't do the mine carts. And I'm like, I get it, but I mean, they did Star Tours. I mean, somehow they could do the mine carts. So
everyone loves the ride. I go on it. I don't love it. I never did.
It doesn't. The problem is it rarely works every time you go on it. It's always like there's parts of it that people don't even know are broke. So when I saw grad night, it was fully functional. It was like the week it came out, everything was working to the point where like if you shake poles, everything, like the roof would almost cave in, things like this, and it was fully lit up. Like the line was fully lit up in a way that it's not now.
Yeah. There's like a pole that you could like pull on, and it starts to like make like a cave in and stuff, and and that stuff it never works. It breaks down all the time. Yeah. And then it's supposed to have like the multiple paths, and they mostly only seem to have like one path open.
And I didn't understand at the time that they had to pay Harrison Ford for his likeness. So when I'm like, why doesn't it look like Harrison Ford? Like it's Fordish, you know what I mean? Like
it looks more like a stunt double.
Looks more like my Leia figure I just bought. You know what I mean? Like,
is that Anthony Kiedis?
When you said that, I was like, "Oh my god, it is!" And this whole time, I was like, "It looks more." That is a very androgynous action figure.
It is. It very, very forward for the time.
Yes, it is.
So, yeah. So let's see what Josh says. Tarantino was just on Joe Rogan's podcast, and it was an awesome conversation. I would highly recommend it. Okay, yeah, I'll check that out. I generally seem to like Joe Rogan stuff when he doesn't go downtown to Brotown too hard. And then, so it's like, I'll watch one and I'll be like, I love this guy. I'll watch another one and I'm just like, this is so dumb right now.
Well, he's that blend of like Howard Stern and Art Bell.
Yeah.
You know, with the jock comedian vibe. So it's like this like stand-up plus like a WWE, brawler, because he didn't really do MMA professionally, but you know what I mean? He did like tournaments and stuff. So you have a little bit of that jockness, but then you have like this Art Bell part of him where he's just like, hey man, let's talk about, the triangles. And then
that's a good impression.
And I listened to the interview because I'm like, because right now like anytime someone finds something new, so you have a friend who like discovers religion and now you're like, they just won't shut up about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's me and UFOs. That's me and UFOs right now.
I know all about the UFO stuff. So when you go off on it, I'm like, this is fun. Like, let's see. I love watching someone discover Bob Lazar for the first time.
Yeah,
because I watched it live in '89 when I was at my cousin lived in Cerritos, so I was there that summer.
That's like a mile from me.
Right, it's so Catella Drive, dude, like right over there, and like across from there's that pool. They had an indoor pool. They're like across from the indoor pool. And so Bob Lazar, I was like, "There's UFOs are real," so that's when the first time I came across it. And then I grew up with Art Bell and the Phoenix Lights. So like, I turn on the thing because I'm like, I want to listen to Tarantino talk. Let's see how the Rogan thing goes. You know what I mean? Like, and he did try to go down like the first few minutes. I'm not gonna spoil the interview, but the first few minutes, he's like, "You would never be able to do this in Hollywood like what you did." You couldn't do that now, right? And you can see what he's trying to do. And Quentin shoots it down pretty quick. And he goes, hey, man, I was just a kid working a video store. I came out the 80s when they were doing 3 Minute Baby. You know what I mean? No one was making Resident Evil. Reservoir Dogs.
Reservoir Dogs, yeah.
I know, because I'm a gamer too, right? And I don't like Resident Evil. No one's making Reservoir Dogs. I wasn't Quentin Tarantino when I made that. I had to make that movie, man. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, he did. And then Joe, shut up. Right? Like, you realize, just chill out. Like,
yeah. That the whole like UFO thing, like I followed it like as a kid. Like I watched Sightings. Sightings on Fox was like one of my favorite shows on Sundays. I was like, where's the UFOs? Where's the ghost? And then you just like hit that point where you're just like, well, this is going nowhere, and the crazies are here, and you can't tell what's real anymore. And so, or what has merit to investigate. So you're just like, I give up.
But well, I started thinking at the time when you were going down the Corbell and the Lazar info, coincidentally, I just popped open my Phantom Menace book. I don't know why. And I was looking at the Doug Chiang concept art for Naboo, and I'm like, yeah, that Naboo stuff is very chrome spaceshipy, right? Like the quintessential like 50s UFO. And then I'm looking at the concept art for the Nemodians when they were originally supposed to be CGI, and they look like gray aliens, like more like insectish, but more. I mean, I know like eventually Attack of the Clones, the cloners became that sort of gray alien look. But if you look at the Nemodians, they're like this gray old alien. Then they had all this gold covered in them, in a way that they're not portrayed in the film, right? Because they did the shitty puppet. Dude.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. It's not a good look for anybody.
It's very much either Lucas was doing drugs or was going hard on the throwback, and it's not clear.
I wish there was. I guess there's no way to do it other than whole new shots. But if you were going to spend some money on a so-called special edition, like, could we make the Nemodians look like they did in the concept art? But then I was like, that has to be a UFO reference. Some of that stuff, like the chrome ships, because Doug Chiang, he ended up doing a book with Orson Scott Card, who's problematic, but it was called Robota. Was it Robota? And it was like a 70-page book, and there was all this concept art that Doug did. And it's great if you like the prequel paintings when he did the actual acrylic paintings, because he would paint these giant chrome UFOs next to 18th century like Master Commander ships.
Okay.
And so it's like that thinking, I'm like, that's a very George thinking, where you literally just take this chrome thing and you shove it next to some historical thing, and you're like, that is so. So when people are like, can't put aliens in Indiana Jones, I'm like, that Robota artwork, I think it could work. It's just the story, right? Like, just make the story work. The idea of it isn't that far-fetched. So especially when you're dealing with melting faces and pulling people's. Hey, we could pull a living heart out of someone's chest and they can still live, right? But don't go with the aliens. It's just not believable.
Do that. Yeah. Right. No. It a lot of times it just has it has to do with your worldview, I think, on what your supernatural worldview is. Whether aliens are appropriate or not, like for you in an Indiana Jones movie. And by all means, but I should probably hit this before I forget. I saw this through the Club Obi-Wan Twitter account, and it was basically showing that out in Glasgow, it was a link to the Glasgow Times, and all kinds of like, they've set up a street out there with like American flag kind of like decorations, and it's like all like sandwich shops and very 1960s like breakfast specials and stuff like that, and the trash cans, and it looks very much like New York in the 1960s.
Oh
And
wow.
so it kind of looks like it could be going, that space race rumor may be panning out.
Oh, the
Based,
Operation Paperclip or whatever, right? Where
yeah,
they brought the Nazi scientists in and stuff. Yeah.
yeah. So it looks
Didn't.
like that could be panning out, and that might be what they're doing out there.
Do you think Indy goes to the moon and just finds Stanley Kubrick out there? Like it wasn't a fake. He actually just went to the moon. Like
right?
What?
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious as to what the a space race plot ends up being, though, because it's like I don't believe for a second they're going to go redo interdimensional beings and aliens like in that way. So are we just going, is it just going to be space race, and is there just going to be like a one-off line where he's like, people are like, are there space people, and he's just like, believe it, kid. Is it like,
Bro,
like how
let's
to,
be honest. It just
yeah,
dawned on me right now. I don't have an agenda. But
yeah, yeah,
if
no.
it was about a monolith,
Right,
it is the artifact of all cinematic artifacts.
right,
And if anyone could get away with it and pull that off, they would. I gotta imagine, like Spielberg is always able to pull off some like, why? How did Spielberg get all the Disney characters and Roger Rabbit together, right? Like, how did Spielberg get all these Spawn and all these weird characters in Ready Player One? Like, I could see
yeah.
Spielberg getting the monolith for an indie. Like, if that was the one thing he pulled as an executive producer position, I'll just call him, so Steven, yeah, me and Kathleen are here.
Maybe that one that they found out in the desert over the like last year, that big chrome
Right.
monolith. Maybe it was viral marketing for Indy 5, and it got delayed,
Oh.
right?
Oh, Jason, the connections, dude. Like I got that Charlie.
Yeah, right.
Would that be look? It's not, but like if it was, you got to win an Oscar for that kind of viral marketing, right? Like there has to be, like Ryan Reynolds needs to come out and just hand you the Oscar of viral marketing. like you earned this. Like,
You earned this, yeah.
Yeah.
James Washington says that Frank Oz once said no to him in a tweet when I asked if he was involved in a Star Wars project, and I was so happy he replied, I thought of getting it framed.
You should get it like tattooed, like print it out, and then have them. It's Frank Oz telling me no, right there.
But get the text in Old English and say you got in prison.
Right next to a really shitty Calvin peen, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or the world's coolest tramp stamp. But Mark Hamill wished my son a happy second birthday and said that he hopes his second year is better than his first. And I actually uploaded it to my like photo account on Amazon, and I do plan on getting that one printed out.
That's awesome.
Because Luke Skywalker telling you happy birthday when you're 2 cannot be beat.
No, I mean, it blows my mind now because there was an article about artists, feeling pressure to like constantly post online and how many followers you have. And I was like, man, when I was a kid, like no one cared about, like, if you could get someone just interested to look at something you drew, or like I had a buddy that played, he had the one rock band in school, right? And they would go out and play on the quad, and everyone would be like, oh, these guys, And it was like now they feel too much pressure. I gotta have 50 million, followers, and I'm like, man, I would have just, if I had known I'd even have 10, like 50 or 100, let alone I can speak to Luke Skywalker on the computer, like, and he will wish me a happy birthday. Like, I don't even know if I could have contemplated that that can really happen. Like, that is strange.
I think what you're kind of getting, or you're kind of speaking to in a weird way too, ties in to like Quentin Tarantino's point, is that like everybody's doing this thing and you got to do it, but at the same time you kind of gotta do you and do what you want to do, and then hope that it, you know, you get stuff around it. And at the same time, how do you do it without having a social media presence today? I don't know, but I'm sure there's a way. I'm sure you don't have to.
It's what a good agent's for, publicity agent or publicist is for, right? Like,
Yeah.
just let them deal with the social medias, you know?
Yeah, because like social media is like, it sucks. Like I really despise it. I wish I didn't have to use it at all. If it had no bearing on being able to like do anything like Star Wars related, like if there's no other way to tell my buddy here, Christopher, or for Jordan to ask me if Maz Kanata is going to show up, if I don't say, hey, I'm going live in 15 minutes, you know, and to do that kind of thing. And it's true, like I've never like tried to make my music stuff like a career. It's always been like, this is esoteric kind of shit that I want to make, and I'm gonna just do it how I want to do it on my own. Like that's been like my goal. But when I do go on my social media and I push it, or I'd be like, check this out, or listen to this crap, then people will look at it. And then it all of a sudden now I will get, you know, on Spotify, I'll end up getting 10,000 listens or something. And then, but what if you don't do it? It's like, well, you all you can hope for is a sleeper hit. Like, and with whatever you do, it's very, very strange.
It's the only way I've been able to get work though. Like,
really?
I mean, since 2005, like I was not the sole. I mean, I've been on the internet, like in a board, like in AOL, talking about episodes of Batman the animated series, you know, and I went like in 94, 95. So I was always like perusing the internet, and when they launched the Star Wars, the site with, remember, it was just an image of like the heads and Anakin running in the desert, like in 96, 95.
Yeah. And then you had like some like Coruscant, like concept art kind of, and some of it.
And people were ripping the images and trying to piece them together to rebuild Coruscant. Like, what is this, you know? But it was never like, here's my page, even through the MySpace stuff. It wasn't until I realized that there's no place to go to like interview for an art job. Technical work and production work, yes. For like anything computer animated, like if you're going to model or rig or anything, yes. But when it comes to art, these people literally, even in 2005, will just find folks that they like stuff and then approach them. They don't want to go bring a bunch of people in and then tell a bunch of artists no. You know, like, no, we don't like you.
Yeah.
You know, like
that's a huge bummer.
So I don't have a choice in that matter. But what I have found out that I don't have to do is I never type my opinion too much.
Yeah.
Because you can't control tone, right? You can't control the tone of what you type. People will read, like if I'm like, man, the prequels, you know, like I got some nostalgia for the prequels. They're gonna look at that and go, he said the prequels are better than whatever you know, like that's not what I said, man. Like that's not what I'd rather just make my mistakes on camera. So I can at least the tone, like, look, this is what I said. My bad. Like
yeah. No, I've talked about it. Like one time I was talking to somebody about like Barriss Offee and like how it changed, and I'm like trying to be positive. I'm like, yeah, so you know, these changes. And this person's just like, Barriss Offee's my favorite character. Who are you to tell me? And I'm just like, whoa, take your pills. Calm down. And it's like, and that's when I started to realize you can't really have open discussion with strangers because you don't know who's crazy.
Well, on the games, it's like people ask me, why did you do this? Why'd you do that? I'm like, NDA.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you work on it? Yep. And what a NDA. Like I can't, I mean that NDA, man. Some people feel like, how could you sign an NDA and you can't talk about it? I'm like, it's the best shield in the world. Because it's not my job to speak for this, and I would never want to. You know, I just like, it's not my job, man. Like that, it's my get out of jail. I don't have to talk about this, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and I literally can't. So that's even better. Like woo, you know, like you imagine if JJ pulled that out, why'd you do this, JJ? And he'd be like, NDA, like who do we speak to now? Like,
Yeah. What did we do? He just won. He just won. We don't know where to take this. Carl asked, you guys ever listen to the podcast Star Wars Oxygen? It's David W. Collins and Jimmy Mack from Rebel Force Radio about the music of Star Wars. David is great. Jimmy is fine. I've heard Collins talk about music before with Star Wars stuff. Dude knows his stuff when it comes to the music side of things. That's for sure. Apparently Indy 5 is about the space race. Yeah, I mean, and it does look like there are clues going up out there in Scotland that it appears to be a celebration of America maybe doing it. I'm not sure. It's kind of weird. Or is it like the moon? Are we going all the way to the moon in this one? What does it mean? Is it gonna be the dark side of the moon civilization?
It's just Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
Like if it was Zack Snyder's Indiana Jones, it would be definitely Pink Floyd in the opening trailer.
Yeah.
just so you get it, like okay, what if it's Dr. Manhattan, we're going to Mars? Like it's some weird Watchmen tie-in or something. Like look, I mean, the problem with guessing is that it's never as inventive as we would make it, but it's with Mangold, like it'll probably be cooler than I could, like legit. When you really think legit, it'll probably be legit cooler than I could conjure up. But I do like the absurd ideas, like some of the more absurd. Like, yeah, they find the monolith, and then it's American graffiti in space. It's like the Kessel Run, how I imagined the Kessel Run to be, like
yeah,
versus the movie. I thought it was going to be like It's a Mad World, like in space, right. Or I thought it was going to be like Smokey and the Bandit. It's serious, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, that's pretty. So, like whatever, dude. But what if Indiana Jones, what if it was Moonraker? Like it's Jaws. They put Jaws in the movie. Jaws. It's a twofer.
I'm cool with that. I mean, like, and my hot take is that Moore is a great Bond. As a kid, like that was my James Bond.
The Adam West of James Bonds.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I've actually
not at all.
When I was a kid, I was like, I grew up on the 60s Batman. And then when 89 Batman came out, I was like, no more 60s Batman. This is the Batman, this is my thing. And I let that go. Like now I look back, especially on the Blu-ray releases of the Batman show that are in Super HD. I'm like, this might be my favorite Batman now. Like, I know it sounds odd, but it's like I get it's not realistic, but then again, it's not trying to be, and
no.
Look, Joker's not murdering everyone, they're just having a good time. You feel like the Munsters or Gilligan's Island could come in at any time, and it would make sense. Like,
yeah, no, that's what was kind of weird is like you hear about like George Lucas and like how he grew up, in this like pop culture trash heap of Flash Gordon and stuff. But we kind of had that too. And it was like on Saturday mornings, like I remember the best pop culture moment of probably being about 4 years old. And I was watching Little Rascals on Channel 5. And then I watched the Three Stooges. Oh, by the way.
KTLA, right?
Yeah.
They would play that.
Yeah. And side note, I was listening to Radiohead in the shower today, and Creep came on. And at the end of that song, he sounds like the Three Stooges dude. It sounds like Curly at the end of that. Anyways,
write that down.
But then the Beatles came on and they played "I Want to Hold Your Hand," and I was like, "What is this noise?" And then they played "Twist and Shout," and I was like, "I don't know what this is, but I love it." And then for some reason, it cut to John Williams playing Star Wars. With an orchestra, and it was like this like weird thing about John Williams and his music and film. It's like probably like 3 minutes long. It's like they just like needed to fill up time in these weird when they were showing like weird old TV shows, and I was just like, whoa! And like the amount of stuff that I just got introduced to, like in that one little run, like in this one like Saturday afternoon was insane. And
Well, I got introduced to Popeye cartoons through that channel because they would have the Popeye
that
cartoons,
dude,
but then they would have the animators on before to introduce,
yeah,
like Fleischer or whatever. They have them on. They'd be like, "Here's me," and I'm like, "My God, he's drawing the. Are you making the cartoon right now?" I didn't understand how that
yeah.
worked. Like, no, they made them 50 years before, nitwit. But yeah, so I just think like there's room for I don't want to say camp, but things that aren't, not everything has to be an Oscar winning serious movie, right?
Right.
Like I sort of feel like I love The Dark Knight. It's my favorite of the Batman films, but probably the worst thing that happened to The Dark Knight is The Dark Knight, because now every film has to be The Dark Knight. It's like The Dark Knight Returns, the graphic novel. Blew my mind when it came out. But there's more than one version of this stuff. It doesn't all have to be Frank Miller all the time. You
Well,
know,
and that's
like
how I feel about the prequels. Like once Lucas started doing, how did Darth Anakin become Darth Vader? Every superhero movie became, how does he become Batman? And I'm like, I want to see a fucking Batman movie. I want to see a Spider-Man movie. I don't want to see about becoming anymore. I want to see like, and that's when Marvel started doing its own thing, and it was like, oh, thank God.
you brought up over explaining things in Star Wars yesterday
Mhm.
with the Jason. Not Jason, that's you, your buddy. I'm horrible with names, Jason. So just bear with me.
Everybody's Jason on this show.
I'm Jason now, like I am Spartacus. But how like you can like over explain things or try to find everything has to have a meaning. I mean, it dawned on my head right in that moment. Could you imagine like the reason why Steve Rogers was able to accept the super soldier serum was because he had this specific thing that we test for now, right? And if we just test for that aptitude, that whatever
Yeah.
it is, like it's like I get why, but at the same time, not really necessary for a story. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like the one dude that it worked with them, don't work with no one else. Why? Because I don't know why. Why was Michael Jordan so great? You know what I mean? And everyone else, I mean, everyone
Yeah.
else was great, but why was Michael Jordan that good? You know, like that guy was amazing back in the day. Like I didn't even watch basketball, and I'm like, hey, it's pretty good. It's so good.
Yeah.
I went and saw a movie with him and a bunch of cartoon characters. That and for the trailer for the special editions, but
Fair enough. Fair enough.
yeah.
Yeah, that's how it was. I saw. I think I saw Independence Day because they had like the earliest special edition trailer on it. And man, that movie made me livid as a teenager. Now I see it and I'm like, oh, he beats up the alien. It's kind of funny. you know.
Well,
You
Bob
know.
Lazar's in that movie too. So the guy who played Data played this crazy scientist at Area 51.
Yeah.
So Bob had to bring it back to UFOs because why
Yeah.
not?
It's fair. This is a space show. Not about
Bob had
spaceships.
a movie deal with Fox or one of those studios, and they kept wanting to turn it into like he's on the run and the government's coming after him, and then there's aliens, and he's like, and he goes, no, I went there, I did the thing, and I don't,
Yeah.
wish I didn't, and so he would never let them like do the Hollywood exaggerated bit, so that they invited him to the premiere of Independence Day because of that scene. That's their spacey Bob Lazar, moment, and just gotta wonder what it was like for that dude to be like, I got paid, right? Okay,
Yeah.
that's how it turned out.
He's like, can I get a Corvette so I could drive up in a Corvette? Okay, I'll do it.
Well, you saw his video
I've seen that one before. Yeah.
where he takes off in the Corvette,
Corvette.
right?
Yeah.
That's the one time I spent money. I got my stepfather was into this stuff, so
Yeah.
we mail ordered that and watched the VHS. It's on YouTube now. If you want to hear Bob Lazar explain how gravity and gravitrons, or no, gravitational waves work versus gravitrons, can bore the heck out of you. But it comes more true for me. It comes more true every year. Like it's the only dude I believe in is the Bob Lazar story. That's it.
Yeah. My take is, you can't know if Bob's telling the truth. But
Yeah.
if I had to bet on somebody who was, it would be Bob Lazar.
Well, I believe like Knapp agrees that he probably lied about his education, but because in the '80s, and what George Knapp doesn't tell you is what I remember, and you'll remember this probably too, is they told you always lie on your resume when I was a kid. Just always lie, just exaggerate, doesn't matter,
Yeah.
And I think that's what that was, because I don't see Bob Lazar sitting in class taking notes. He's a guy who's just going to want to make stuff, like he's not going to be like, I'm going to go do flashcards and memorize this stuff. And he's not going to do that.
I tried to rationalize it. Like if all of that wasn't true, if the education stuff wasn't true, if he wasn't sent to study with certain professors at time and this kind of stuff, right? If none of that's true, then like how do you make it make sense? And I was like, well, if there's a lot of secrecy, were they just bringing in randos who they thought might crack the code, might just crack? What is that simply what it ended up amounting to?
He did have a job at the Los Alamos. That's true. It was through a subcontractor. And I know what's his face, the other guy, this other UFO guy tried to debunk it. But what that guy doesn't tell you is that he didn't do anything but call the operator at that place and ask a question and hang up the phone. That's not true. But the scientist was there, the nuclear scientist. Again, I'm horrible with names. Yeah. And they were talking and he showed him his article in the paper with the rocket engine. And I definitely think it's one of those. I've been hired for jobs where I'm not qualified for because I'll give you an example. This has actually happened. Was in 2003, San Diego hosted SIGGRAPH. You know what SIGGRAPH is? Mm-mm. It's a big convention for technology.
Oh, so I do. I have heard of that. I have heard of this. Yeah.
And it's bigger than the conventions there. They have things around town where you play animation, some fun, some technical, like where they do reconstructive, by your cells, how your cells work, like little machines, and they'll recreate that as animation. So it's a big technological. You're right, dude. When you see this is 2003, I was like, wow, wow, life is crazy. By the time they were building the Padre baseball stadium, and I had to get to the convention center, and so I was like, I'm just going to cut through this construction site. And there was another guy who had the same idea. And we go there, and the security guard was like, "Get the hell out of here!" And I'm like, "Damn it, I got to go around." And he said, "You know what? I'm just going to drive there and pay for parking. You want to come with me?" I'm like, "Sure." This guy had a Corvette. All right, true story. And I'm like, all right. So we started.
It was talking. Bob Lazar, wasn't it?
No, it was not. Right, but it may have well been. It was the head of Red Lion Studios, and they were making Game Day. So he had a speech he had to do about physics and football physics and games. And so I start chatting with him. I'm not a big football guy, but I played NFL Quarterback Club 99 on the Nintendo 64 because it was 4 players. So I was getting into it's like chess. And if you got 4 players, this is fun. NFL Blitz I liked. And so I could talk, and I liked the NFL 2K games on the Dreamcast. So I was talking to him about that. And then he rear-ended someone. So we got into a car accident. And so I was stuck with them for an hour waiting for all that to sort out. And I make, schmooze, right? That's what they tell you to do. The only reason why I took a job at SIGGRAPH, you could volunteer if you're in college, and I was in college. So just some preface. So I was trying to schmooze. I'm like, this is the guy I'm going to schmooze with. I got an hour of his time. We became friends, gave me his card, said, if you want a job, call me, So I called him, got a job interview, right? Just because of that. Yeah. But that was the day EA signed. The day of my interview was the day EA signed the exclusive NFL contract. And they shut the studio down that day. So I was like, oh. Yeah. And then I got the t-shirts. So that's that's kind of how it went. But it does happen. I mean, people do meet you, and if they need a position, whether you have no experience or not, if you have talent and they like you, all they can do is be like, we'll fire him if he doesn't work out, And so I believe that part of it. And the way he described, he didn't work at Area 51. He worked at S4.
S4, yeah.
Nobody knew what S4 was.
Right.
And no one ever heard it. People were like, we've heard of Area 51. Nobody heard of S4. Yeah. It just never came up. So I believe it. And if I'm wrong, I'm willing to be wrong about it. Because after 30 years of listening to dude talk, I'm like, he's not selling Bob Lazar the mug. Bob Lazar the flamethrower.
Well, he is now selling his sketches of the UFO that he did on Jeremy Corbell's thing.
I would love to own one.
Yeah, and I don't blame him for that though.
Yeah.
I don't blame the guy for living in a capitalist society where he has to eat like the rest of us.
But how many people are making books based off Bob Lazar's info?
Sure. Right.
You know what I mean? It's not like Bob Lazar, and here's all the other adventures I had in space,
Yeah.
I forgot about, sorry,
Yeah.
So Bob Lazar, the special edition.
Yeah, if you guys haven't seen the Netflix documentary on Bob, that's it does a little bit of that conspiratorial kind of
Overproduced.
production.
You
And
can
my
turn the camera. Hey guys,
yeah,
check
and
this time.
my guess, and this could be, I could be totally wrong, but my guess is that the investors in the documentary wanted something like that, and so that's what was done. But the interviews themselves are solid. Like the actual like journalistic side of getting Bob's perspective and story is so well done.
Well, you can also, there's an old interview with George Knapp you can find on YouTube where he was at a convention and he talked about Bob Lazar for almost an hour and a half.
Yeah.
They flew him out to France, or no, the Netherlands, somewhere in Eastern Europe. They flew him out, you know, and he does a really good job of explaining and being practical. Like Knapp does, he's pretty practical about Bob. So
Yeah.
I know, man, it's one of those things where it's like, look, I'm not going to convince anyone to care. If you come to it and you're interested, there's real meat on the potatoes there. I mean, like I found Coast to Coast because the Phoenix Lights. I watched that the night it happened. I was like, what's going on? I turned on the news because it was funny in San Diego. It was, I'll never forget it. I just come home from Playcow. So when I was working at Playcow, and a homeless guy stole a bus in El Cajon. And so he was driving the bus around like the OJ with the van. He was driving the bus, and everyone was like, "Yep," which is such a Southern California thing to do, right? Everyone was like, "Yeah, bus guy," and that was going on. And then the UFO thing, like you could just go, "What is it?" And it was the one on the ridges when they were going up and stuff, and the orbs. And I was like, "Bus UFO, bus UFO." This is blowing my mind. But nobody talked about. I figured the very next day it would be all over the papers. Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. There wasn't anybody talking about it except Art Bell, like on AM radio. I was turning the radio around because that's what we had. And he was the only one talking about it. But there wasn't another news article about it until like June. That was in March, and it wasn't until June when they did the full, here's what it was. And it was this drawing. I remember it was a drawing of like an elaborate balloon flares, military flare scheme. You know, like I'm like, well, what? It took what? You know, like that seems like a lot of effort to confuse a bunch of people. And then coincidentally, a year later, I ended up in the Army, and we did nighttime military flares. The first, and I looked at it. I remember looking at it, I'm like, shit wasn't flares, man. This don't look nothing like flares.
No, that's funny. Like on that subreddit RUFOs, sometimes people will do will post a test like, here's what a Chinese lantern looks like when I let it go, and they try to recreate what they have said is a Chinese lantern and when it's totally not. And you're like, yeah, that doesn't hold water. You know, I was listening to the Black Vault podcast a couple of weeks ago, and I think he had two debunkers on at the same time who were debunking one another. I was like, this is genius.
You ever see the movie The Big Hit?
No, I don't think so.
With Mark Wahlberg. It's a funny mob movie. It's got Avery Brooks, the guy who played Cisco in Deep Space Nine, he plays a mob guy, and these dudes, Lou Diamond Phillips plays like a really over the top mob guy who they kidnap his daughter on accident. That's a setup, and Mark Wahlberg has to fix it. Christina Applegate's in it. Elliot Gould's in it. It's a fun movie, but they have this whole sequence where they have this, where they want to make a phone call, so they got a trace buster. So if they try to trace the line, they got a trace buster, and they go, but the other guys have a buster for the buster. So if they try to trace the trace buster, we got an extra trace buster. And this guy explaining this, and this is super like white rapper dude, right? It's like, if you got, and he's like, he has a thing because he's high too. The trace buster, you trace buster. Like, so whenever I hear like a debunker's debunking or anything like that, like a double, I go, it's the trace buster's busting the trace. I bust this guy's trace buster.
Yeah, it's like I completely like who's that one guy who's always debunking things? Mick West. Like I completely respect that position needs to exist.
Like exactly, especially considering how conspiracy theories have gone.
But the conspiracy or the debunkers also need to learn about Occam's razor a little bit. Like when what you're doing is so outlandish, when like it requires the radar failed and this guy doesn't know what he's doing, and the person looking with his own eyes has cataracts. Like it's just like, what? like what are you like? Where are you going with this? Not that McWest said that exactly, but it's that kind of thing where I'm like, no, this is too outlandish now.
Well, the
Like,
one thing I'll wrap this up. Like the one thing that I always go back to with that is, you can prove Bob said something. Whatever he said, whatever. In '89, he talked about how gravity is a waveform.
yeah,
But at the time, they didn't believe that. They believed there was these things called gravitrons. There was electrons, protons, and gravitrons. And the gravity as a waveform didn't happen until like 93, 95.
mm-hmm.
Like that. And so that's one of those things. Like, who was talking about gravity as a waveform in 1989? Like, this wasn't happening. So,
Yeah,
I mean, either he's just a real eccentric genius who right just stumbled on to like, this stuff, or it's a gut check. But I just don't think, like, at the end of the day, if you're looking for answers in the UFO section, just you're gonna have a better chance of reading the script to episode 7 that Little
Michael
Miss
Art
Sunshine
wrote.
guy. Yeah, you got a better chance of reading that before you're gonna get
Yeah,
all the answers you want.
for sure. I was gonna say, I don't know if anybody cares about this. Let me pull it up. If wait, hold on. I don't know if you guys saw, but there's a new Sith Lord. This dude. He was what's his name? It's like it's something funny. It's like Darth Crawl, with Krall.
Like the opening
Wikipedia.
crawl.
Yeah, exactly. Darth. His first name is Opening. Darth Opening Crawl.
Okay. Yeah, his
Originally,
parents were
but
tax federation.
he's one of the Lost 20, was seduced by the dark side of the Force, and he's in the High Republic era.
Okay.
So at least that's from what I can understand, he's in the High Republic era, because originally known as a male Force. He's in that Duke. He's mentioned in the Dooku book, and so if I have that right, I didn't look into this at all, but if I have that correct, I think it has interesting ramifications for what Acolyte will be about.
I'm so interested in that show, man.
Yes, Johannes was asking again, will the Jedi have a big role in the Acolyte show? And it's like, we don't know. We definitely have to assume that the Sith do. And if this Darth Crawl dude exists at the time, and if he is a High Republic character, which I don't know, because I just like came across this like right before the show. I was like, maybe somebody in the chat will know. But with that in mind, yeah, it definitely would inform where what the structure of that show is going to look like, because we have questions about the show, like, do the Sith exist? Does this acolyte to a spirit bring it back? Like, was it defeated at one time, and then it reemerges 200 years before the Phantom Menace, thanks to this cultist who kind of idea. There's all kinds of ways that it can go. So, but Johannes, I think, has asked this before, and it's like, will the Jedi have a role, or a big role? But I don't know about a big role, but will they have a role? I have to think that they're like the dominant force that not, no pun intended, but that keeps things in check at the time, and who they're hiding from, right? If that's where it's going. So I would have to think so. I would have to
I have to wonder
imagine.
too, is the tone going to be like, is it a Jedi who becomes disenfranchised and discovers things and he becomes like, a double agent?
Yeah.
Do we get that sense of paranoia and fear of hiding, that you have something else? Like, will you see the Jedi in I don't want to say a negative light, but from their point of view, right? A certain point of view.
Yeah.
Like, will you get a sense of like, I gotta hide this, like if you got a Snape to make the Harry Potter reference, like a Snape TV show, like, where he's doing his dark art stuff, but he's also a good guy, but like he's seen as a bad, like, I wonder how that will go,
Yeah, because like supposedly when we see Dooku, or when Palpatine and Sifo-Dyas, no, not Sifo-Dyas, I'm losing it.
Sifo-Dyas.
Plagueis, when they do their like dark magic, that's when the veil came down and they couldn't sense the Sith Lord in their own house, so to speak, when Palpatine was just down the street. That was how that whole thing went down. So they have to honor that somehow. like in some way, maybe it won't be big, but in
Matt
some
Smith.
way, yeah, right. That is still such a weird one. I still don't have the answers to what the hell that was, but I do know. Like, I think I talked about it. Like, there was actually somebody at one of the licensees who knew that they were having a lot of leaks, put out that rumor about becoming young and Matt Smith jumping into Kylo, and Palpatine jumping into Kylo, and then Kylo like pushing it out and then killing the body and all that stuff. All of that was a licensee trying to catch their own leak.
Right. Yeah, I remember you talked
But
about
they
that.
messed up and gave the same story to everyone, so they couldn't trace it correctly.
They bust their own trace buster, dude.
They busted their own trace
See,
buster.
what I want to see, and this is why you don't put me in charge of Star Wars, is I want to see Egg Shen and Lo-Pan do the fighting thing with the hands and the spiritual wars. That's what, when you first talked about like spiritual, like ghost fighting and the possibility of Episode 9, that's what I saw was the ending to Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah.
Where like, are they using the Force to have Force gods like fight with one another? You know, like,
right.
Will they project a 6 foot tall Yoda? You know, and Plagueis projects.
Big I am.
You know, I am the Minch. You know?
Who's the little Minch now? Oh shit!
He does a spin with the lightsaber, like he revs up.
Yeah, I'd watch it. I'd watch it.
I know, it's like, Rob, you're not taking it serious. You know, I would not be good in the writer's room.
Kathleen Kennedy's going to be like, Rob, I need you to start filming more coverage, and then fire you the very next day.
It's all coverage of the Minch, you know.
Yeah. Qui-Gon says, I must have been on deployment when the bus was stole. I remember when homie stole a tank and took it for a joyride.
So that was a couple years before, and that went right across that play call I worked at. It went right down there. It was right down that it was a convoy. Yeah, in Linda Vista.
Listen to the Dollop podcast episode about that if you don't know everything about it. It is so good.
Will do.
And it turns out that homeboy was doing a lot of meth, then started digging for a gold mine in his backyard, was having other meth heads come over to dig in the gold mine because they would bring him meth to do. Then he started getting kids in the neighborhood to steal gold from their parents, melted it down and hid it in the gold mine. So then the meth heads thought there was really gold in there. And then he went to the city and said, I want to stake a claim on my gold mine. And they're like,
why is this? Okay.
It's your backyard. It's your backyard. It's yours.
Two things. I was going to say, why is this not a TV show? But then, asymmetrically thinking, I just popped in my head. In Breaking Bad, there's a scene where Jesse Pinkman goes with Mike to this house. They have to get in this meth house to get something.
Yeah.
And Jesse just goes out there and starts digging a hole in the front yard.
Yeah.
Right? And the meth guy goes, what are you doing? Digging a hole. And then they all join him to dig the hole. And I'm like, I wonder if that's.
I think so. I bet you. Yeah. And so then he doesn't pay his rent or his mortgage for like 2 years and loses his house. And then that's when he thinks that they're trying to take his gold mine that he made up and he knows is fake. And then he gets into the tank and he just plans on driving up to the city council's like steps of City Hall and scaring them, but does more math and just goes for it, man. Just goes for it. So yeah, that Dollop is easily, I think, the highlight of podcasting. Like, podcasting for me peaked in that episode.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it's very, very good. So hey, it's Ben. How's it going, dude? Also, guys, listen to Commander David Freyer's story about his encounter with a UFO with the squadron. Your Times did a big write up on him.
Yeah, the Rendlesham story is weird though. I've heard things in the past where it may not be what we thought it was. Like, it may be overinflated. So I've just put it in my fun to listen to, like, especially listen to Coast, and and the whole story line of it. It's like that story George Knapp did, the whole Russian pass of these hikers that went up to this Russian mountain and they all disappeared, and come to find out it's probably something normal, like they just got snowed in and frozen.
I read an article that they used the CGI process from Frozen 2 to emulate snowfall to do a reconstruction of how that whole thing could have happened very naturally.
Right.
And it was Frozen 2 that helped kind of debunk it as there's no better explanation.
Yeah, so but I do love the heightened storyline of it. So I think the Rendlesham Forest thing would have been a great scene for Crystal Skull. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like if you did do like a flash forward or something, like old Indy's 90, you know what I mean? He's a professor at Ravenwood in University or something. Like, shit, what if that is the movie?
Yeah,
Crystal, what if that's this movie? But yeah, Professor Ravenwood, like that, and they were in the Ravenwoods in the ship. Like that would have been something crazy, you know. Or what if he gets in the ship, but then they go back in time and he comes out young, and it's Close Encounters, right? Like
yeah.
There's always those what ifs.
Well, okay, so Richie wants to know if we have any more behind the scenes stories on the prequels today, and I think a really interesting kind of thing about Dooku. I was almost going to do a big video on this, and then I never got around to doing the research, so I didn't do it. But it was about how the casting of Count Dooku, and you had Gabriel Byrne, Christopher Walken, Christopher Lee, and what's his name from Dracula, the oh god, from Batman, Commissioner Gordon on the Dark Knight.
Michael Goff.
No.
Michael Caine.
No, the Commissioner Gordon dude.
Lee Harvey Oswald.
no. Why am I?
He played him.
He played Sid Vicious. Oh my god!
Are you talking about from the Nolan movies?
Yeah.
Yeah, he played JF. He played Lee Harvey Oswald. I know I'm brain farting right now.
Yeah, I always brain fart when I talk for like a long time. Who played The Easiest Way?
I know. This is how the people losing the Schmodown too, by the way. Like
Gary Oldman.
Gary Oldman.
Yeah. No, Gary Oldman. No,
Old man.
Sorry. Gary Oldman. No. Yeah, so all of those dudes were like up for Count Dooku back then. Those were like the credible rumors. And that
imagine if Coppola had directed Attack of the Clones and we got Oldman doing the Bram Stoker Dracula, like.
Well, that's what it ended up coming down from what I could recall, but between it being between those two, are we going to go with Christopher Lee, who's doing Lord of the Rings right now, and so it showed that he wanted Dracula, and like you even see like that Dracula joke he makes against Christopher Lee with Yoda, where he puts for the Yoda stand-in, he puts the fangs on it to like tease him. But my roundabout question to everyone is, what is so Dracula about Count Dooku in the end? The Count?
Nothing.
Word count. The word Count. Count Dracula, Count Dooku. And it really they did not they didn't pull on those Dracula strings whatsoever in the end.
It seems like I thought when they first announced the Count Dooku thing, which first I thought it was Doku. I didn't think they could Dookie, because I'm like, Dookie? That can't be Dookie. It has to be Doku, right? And it's Dooku. I'm like, oh, whatever. I thought
there were arguments on the line on the internet saying it's Doku, like Doku.
I was one of those guys who was like, it's I bought into the
Qui-Gon Jinn. That was another one.
I knew it was Qui-Gon because it's a Tai Chi thing. I was reading a Tai Chi magazine and I was like, oh, so it's Qui-Gon is tight. The George just pulls from whatever magazine is on the dentist table at the time. But I thought Count Dooku might have the castle that Vader eventually got, like that. You know what I mean? Like he's a count. He'd have a castle. Vader has, because I always wonder, why would Vader have a castle? What if it was the Count's castle?
Yeah.
You know, and like that never happened. So then I like Attack of the Clones, people go, it's the worst movie. For me, I actually enjoy when the clone trooper showed up in the whole battle, but I lost it for me with one, Count Dooku was pointless. He was no vampire. I was hoping for like a change. Like you'd see the change that maybe we knew Sidious was doing, right? He'd turn into like a Sith and then you go back to normal. And then when they get to Owen and he's like, guess I'm your brother. And I'm like, that's it? That's what we, you know, I couldn't handle. I don't like it when people write the movie that it could have been.
Right.
But, you know, you do spend 30 years at that point, it's 20 something years thinking about, for me, it was always like Obi-Wan and Owen and that relationship between you took my brother from me kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
I had this whole theory about how that went down. And when Owen looks at Anakin and goes, "Oh, I guess we're brothers." And I was like,
Yeah.
"That's it."
He's like, I
Yeah.
guess we're brothers.
George is like, check that one off the list.
I mean, I think I
All
would be
right.
pretty pissed off though if I lived on Tatooine. I got Baru, who is adorable, and then this asshole shows up. This James Dean looking fucker from Canada. You're just like,
Yeah.
yes, we're brothers. No,
Yeah.
uh,
But yeah, the
yeah,
Dooku thing, if he had the castle, that would have been my jam,
there was back then and during Attack of the Clones, Lucasfilm did not have the brains to not register everything. They wanted to own every URL, and they didn't want to use their power to get it afterwards. So they would preemptively start doing it, which would give us all of the names. And the weirdest one, and I actually asked Pablo Hidalgo about this, and he doesn't remember. He said he didn't remember. There was one named Ambu Fett.
I remember that.
AMBU, like ambulance.
Yeah.
Ambu Fett. And there were no other red herrings in there. So it wasn't a red herring. So
His
at some,
mother. Maybe it wasn't a full clone at the time, or a sister, what became Omega, or an
yeah.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, but I wanted to bring that up. I doubt if Pablo didn't remember, I doubt anybody else there does now. But I started to wonder, what if Ambu becomes Omega?
John Knoll never forgets.
John Knoll. Yeah.
He's the guy who's like, it
Mm.
was the Amber thing, and I didn't agree with it.
He's all Amber sounds like a stripper's name to me. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, no. That's Angel Fett. The Angel Fett.
Might as well just name her Tammy. Is that Tammy Fett? I made Photoshop. Listen to me.
Co-made Photoshop.
Yeah, co-made it.
I added the lens flares.
I always tell my kids that. I'm like, dude, because I'm teaching my son. I don't really know Photoshop, but I'm teaching my son Photoshop. Who's 7. I'm like teaching him how to do things, and we're like, okay, let's make featured images together. So we're like working on that. That way, he learns a skill, I learn a skill. And but I'm like, the dude who co-created this also co-wrote the idea for Rogue One. Like, and then did all the visual. Isn't that crazy? And he's just like, whoa. But I mean, like 100 years from now, there's a good chance that's going to be like the dude who they talk about, and not George Lucas in a weird way. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
he invented the lens flares. So it's the most important part of Photoshop.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't get your episode 1 poster without those lens flares on it.
Like your Warner Brothers ball cap.
Yeah. God. Yeah. I don't look. I don't know if you can see the chat outright, but don't read a guy named Jason's thing because you don't want to be spoiled on Loki. So
can't see the chat.
Okay, so I'm not going to put it on the screen, Jason, because Rob hasn't got to see it yet.
But, I know. I try to come in fully prepared, but
no. Well, this isn't a Loki podcast, but we go there. But we do need to get onto the UFOs with Jason one of these days because that guy knows his stuff.
Oh, we should do it like at midnight.
we should do a UFO episode, and we'll use the featured image will be that Hondo's UFO thing, and we'll just be like, this is about Hondo and Naka and UFOs. There we go. And then now we have our excuse. We can talk about whatever we want, and if we don't remember Gary Oldman's name, then it's okay.
It's like Kevin Smith calls Tudyk 2 dicks. Right?
I did that on the podcast too. I'd always be like, Alan Tudyk.
It's a Star Wars reference now.
Yeah.
Speaking of Rogue One,
but okay, no, it's totally cool. I mean, it's like we're pretty pro spoiler here for the most part, but we
were talking about spoilers, but not those spoilers.
If it was a Star Wars one, I'd just be like, too bad. So just so you know, that was Darth Vader's castle. So.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm really, 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 really excited for what they're gonna do with Acolyte, by the way. Yep. And this isn't a story I could put up on the site because it's not like a big enough scoop. But I was talking to a friend at Lucasfilm, and they're just like, oh man, like you are going to love it. Like it's right up your alley. And this is now me extrapolating, but I have a feeling if you love the prequels, it's going to be your show. And I have a feeling based off of this conversation, if you love aspects but it didn't work for you, it's going to sort of play into that. And not going to say it's going to give that era a reason to exist for you, but that it's going to definitely elevate everything how the Clone Wars did for a certain audience as well. I think that's where this is going. So
it's awesome, man.
We'll have to see. Like after it comes out, we'll have to. I mean, I hope to have you on whenever you want to come on, dude. By the way, open invite. Just let me know
awesome.
when you're free. Come back on. But when Acolyte does come back up, when it finally shows up, we have to have you on there, and we have to see because I'm such a prequel gusher that I am not objective enough, and I'll totally admit that. Like they work for me, like how a Harryhausen effect does. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of stupid looking, but it's kind of cool, and so it gets a pass for me on all kinds of things. I'm curious to see what people who rationally dislike the prequels or rationally weren't in love with them for what they were.
Well, like a cult, I was in the cult when it came out, you know, and then I got myself out of the cult, and then I was like, never again. And now I'm like, there's some merits to that cult. But I can always fall in love with production of anything. Name a movie you dislike. Like I'm not a fan of the Stallone Judge Dredd movie. I would read a whole book on the production of that any day of the week. Or Howard the Duck. You know what I mean? Like what was Tim Robbins' preparation for Howard the Duck? You know?
Yeah.
You know,
no, that makes total sense. I mean, and that's how I feel about the behind the scenes stuff too, is it's almost like I'm a fan of Star Wars as a story, but then I'm also like as big of a fan of this making of Star Wars stuff at the same time. And they're not this, they are completely slapped together in the same sandwich, but they're two different things, you know?
Well, you had said too that, the way to get more Star Wars is to spend your money on it. And so like, as weird as it sounds, I would love a pod racing series. And the only way it's going to happen is if I buy everything prequel related. You know what I mean? Like if they have a prequel toy to this, you got to buy the book. And I worked on Star Wars merch. Here's how it works. They follow the merch. Mm-hmm. So like when we were on the Star Wars 3D, the first 3D release, right, for Phantom Menace.
Right.
And I was like, all right, man, at least I'm going to make some Darth Maul shirts. We're going to get that. And that'll at least sell. Bro, none of it sold.
Yeah.
I thought for certain Darth Maul would sell. Nothing. And retailers were so against putting any of it out because they still are burnt on the leftover merch from that first run, man. I mean, it was 15 years later and it was still.
Yeah. You know. Yeah. Yeah. That was like such a bummer time for me as a Star Wars fan, in the sense that I was really happy that Phantom Menace 3D was coming out. I was totally down to see what they did with it, but I knew that no one was really going to care. They hadn't changed anybody's mind about those movies. They hadn't, the nostalgia hadn't like kicked in on it at all. Like even now, I think if Phantom Menace 3D came out now, it would have performed way better than it did at that time. Not good. I don't think it would have been a good idea ever, but it would have performed better than it did at that time.
Yeah. I also think too, it wasn't a very deep conversion. It wasn't a bad conversion, but it wasn't like they spent $20 million, $40 million like on Titanic conversion. It was like, they got it done conversion. So
the Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith conversions, way better. And they invented so many of their own takes in doing it and did CGI enhancements on it.
Never released it.
They sold it and then it never came out. And it was way better. And I've seen them. I was at a talk in 2000 or 2013, and I saw Attack of the Clones up in Marin County. And they were like, basically like, we were seriously talking about redoing Phantom Menace.
And if that 3D had been, like a theme park ride 3D, I think it would have caught more word of mouth. I'm not saying it would have changed opening night by any measure.
Yeah.
I think also a big mistake from marketing, and this is, if you go read Drew Struzan's, so there's two Drew Struzan books, the the poster artist. If people don't know who Drew Struzan is, he did one in his own words, and there's one called Au revoir, which is a big white thick one. The one he did in his own words is The Art of Drew Struzan. It's a thin little black one. That's
Okay.
the one I recommend because it's his own words. He goes through his whole career, but when he gets to the prequels, he talks about how like the Phantom Menace poster was him and George. He just made it for him and George. But by the time you get to Attack of the Clones, there's a committee. I mean, Revenge of the Sith, there's a committee he had to go through, and that's how
Yeah.
you ended up with those two posters photoshopped over together. He's like, I could have just painted it together. It's not. I would have blended it, and it would have worked. But they just were like, no. And then you get to Crystal Skull, and they didn't even want him painting. He just drew like 500 drawings that they hired a guy to color, and he had to go into an office. He's like, I don't go to an office. And so like it's a little depressing towards the end of the book, but you do get a sense of marketing at the time. And that Phantom Menace 3D didn't have a Drew Struzan poster.
Yeah.
And the big thing for me with the special editions wasn't, yeah, it was to see Star Wars in the theater because I had never seen the first movie in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
But that Drew Struzan poster set, I mean, was breathtaking then, and it's still amazing now. Like,
Yeah.
they're so good. And if they had commissioned Struzan to do a 3D poster like that, I can't stress, man, those posters change everything. If you have an amazing poster, even today, if you have an amazing poster at a movie theater, which I mean, pre-COVID, obviously, you'll blow people away. You know? Yeah.
Yeah. No, it does. I mean, just seeing a good poster makes you go, I want to go, I want to tap into that fantasy, whatever it happens to be. And it's mostly lost today, which is a shame. And I wrote an article. I was probably a little bit too amped up on excited for Indiana Jones when I did it, but I was just like, Struzan says he's willing to do it. You're stupid dickheads if you don't. Because I mean, and it's just true. But at the same time, I do fear that if they would just Photoshop it to hell and edit it into their own little weird thing. Because like even the one that he did for, I don't know what the story is. I actually meant to hang it behind me here. I got a really nice one from them, from Disney.
It would go right there too, like right behind you.
Yeah.
Right there.
I got the one that Struzan did for Force Awakens, and it's like in that one right there, you know that one has to probably have been a blend because there's like suns everywhere, and it doesn't make sense. He wouldn't. I don't think he would put suns down below for one character, another sun up here, like for Han. It kind of just doesn't add up. And I don't know if that's accurate or not, but
well, I know what you're talking about. It does. The composition feels different.
Yeah.
I do think though at the time he was doing the Mondo, he did a Mondo one-off, and he was very big into doing. No one tells me how to compose.
Okay.
So, and if you see his compositions for personal work in that book, that he has some like a section on his personal work. Not much. Mm-hmm. It's very like, remember the CD covers to like Sting albums in the early '90s, where it'd be like a Dave McKean piece of artwork. It's got like some photorealistic thing and then some weird design, like some designish stuff and then some speckle. I feel like it's more like him trying to do that, but not go too far to maybe throw off. If he did the whole composition himself, I could see how that happened.
Yeah.
That maybe he didn't put the full week's worth of rendering. That might be like a 2-night job, could be. So it's more like a color comp than a final render piece. If you're a fan of Struzan work, have you seen the Hellboy documentary?
No, I haven't.
So he did a Hellboy. So he did the poster to Hellboy 1, eventually 2. But when he did 1, they brought in a crew and they did a little video documentary of him while he makes it all the way through. So you just get to see his whole process. And hey, man, if you're educational programming for the kids, you can put that on and just watch it. It's totally family friendly. And you just get to watch him make stuff. And he's a great narrator. He's got a good voice.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's like our Bob Ross.
Yeah, it's cinematic Bob Ross.
Just putting a little bit of Hellboy up here.
I got the Bob Ross figure over here too. Yeah. That is got to be a new celebrity. So Epic Rap Battles, they did Bob Ross versus Pablo Picasso, which is one of my favorites. They got to do, and Bob Ross won that one. It's amazing. It's a great beat too, but they got to do a follow-up Bob Ross versus Drew Struzan. Like, trees versus I can see it now. Like it's writing itself.
Well, my kids are opening the door and letting me know that it is now pool time. So we will wrap this one up here. And dude, where can people find you?
Sketchcraft. Just type in Sketchcraft, like Minecraft or StarCraft, what do you want? Sketchcraft in the internet, you'll find me.
Or witchcraft, tearing up
Or
the tape. No, sorry.
StarCrap. I typed in StarCrap and all I see is you. Like, I know. It's easier than Duenas. Trust me, it's way easier.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, dude. But dude, thanks for coming on today. I had a great time hanging out with you. Whenever you feel like coming on, dude, just hit me up. Tell me you're free. You'll be on. We gotta get you and a whole gang on here. What would be a good time?
Awesome.
Yeah, people have to be tired of just hearing me ramble and talk about King's Castle. I don't know. He says probably King's Castle. Makes me think of Ninja Turtles Krang. I watched that last night with my daughter for the first time. She was like, "This is kind of good and kind of dumb," and I'm like, "Well, I had a good time." thanks for coming over. But yeah, dude. And then I try and start the show every day about 1, but it's never a promise because the kids rule my life, and sometimes work comes up, and you just never know. But I try to start at 1 every day. And but if there's another time that you guys want me to start trying to aim for, let me know, and I'll try to mix it up here and there, because it, like, not everyone can make these all the time, so it would be cool for everyone to have a shot. And if you want the audio only version, you can become a Patreon supporter. Only versions are on there. And you could want to just support the channel, you could do so on YouTube and become a channel member. And I was talking, Ben yesterday suggested a good idea. He's like, maybe we could do like once a month or something like that. We can do like a watch, like a stream just for channel members and Patreon supporters, where we just like put on a Star Wars movie and we could watch them all in order. And we'll have the video, but you guys could jump in if you want to. If you don't want to, you don't have to. And we'll just shoot the shit and watch the movie. And it'll just kind of be a fun hangout, not necessarily to like produce a commentary track, but just to have a fun hangout. And I gotta have Santa on. I gotta get up early and have Santa on. I think
Star Wars Santa's the best, dude.
I have to write Santa, and we do need to. I have that. This is taking too long. I need to get up early, show Santa I'm a good boy, Santa, and and we will have Santa on too. Oh, update: England won. His girlfriend's happy. How many scoops you drop? All of them. And I won't be re-uploading this video, so sorry you missed it. But your girlfriend's happy, so I think you will probably be happy. And unless you like a mad girlfriend. But yeah, we dropped all the scoops, dude. No, we had a good time talking about Star Wars as always. You can watch it on the replay on YouTube.com whenever you feel like it. But anyways, thanks guys. Thanks for coming on, Mr. Rob Sketchcraft. And I'm not going to try to say your last name yet, but I'm going to learn it. And then I'm going to overuse it. You'll see. But thanks to everyone for showing up and for the good conversation. Oh, I almost always forget this, because I am not forgetting this.
It's not about spaceships.